You know that one person in every family? The responsible one. The one who always steps up, who sacrifices while everyone else takes? Yeah, that's me, Brenda. For years, I was the financial crutch, holding up my older brother Ethan and his fiancée Sophia. It all started 3 years ago. Ethan was drowning in debt. Sophia had lost her job, and they were barely scraping by. They never asked me directly, but I could see the struggle. And I had just landed a job as a high school teacher, not exactly rolling in cash, but I had no kids, no mortgage, no major expenses. So I did what family does, right? I offered to help. At first, it felt good. I wired them $800 a month to cover their mortgage and bills. Ethan and Sophia were so grateful, promising it was just until things got better. But months turned into a year, and a year stretched into 3. Every paycheck, I carved out that $800, adjusting my life around it. No vacations, no new clothes, just a quiet, frugal existence while I kept my brother and his fiancée afloat. But gratitude has a funny way of fading. Instead of hearing, "Thank you," I started hearing, "Oh, just send it early this month," or "We really appreciate it, but could you help with wedding expenses too?" The worst part? I was too deep in it to say no. I told myself, "It's just family, Brenda. You're doing the right thing." I had no idea that I was the punchline of a joke I didn't even know existed. Family gatherings were always a mix of chaos and nostalgia, and my dad's birthday was no different. The house was packed, cousins running wild, uncles arguing over football, and the smell of grilled steak filling the air. It was the kind of event that made you forget any family drama, at least for a few hours. Ethan and Sophia arrived fashionably late, looking like they didn't have a single financial worry in the world. Dressed to impress, they laughed and mingled like a picture-perfect couple. If I didn't know better, I'd think they were doing just fine on their own. As the night wound down, my grandfather pulled me aside. "Brenda, can we talk?" His voice was calm, but there was something in his eyes, something serious. We stepped onto the back porch, where the distant hum of laughter was muffled by the night air. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but you deserve to know. Ethan and Sophia, they've been making fun of you." I blinked. "What?" "They think you're stuck in life," he continued, watching my face closely. "That you'll never have a family of your own, that you're wasting your time trying to help them. They laugh about how much you sacrifice while you live alone and struggle to be a teacher." His words hit harder than I expected. My stomach clenched, and for a second, I thought I might be sick. I had given up so much for them, adjusted my entire life to make sure they were okay. And this whole time, they saw me as pathetic, as a joke. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. "Thanks for telling me, Grandpa." He gave my shoulder a squeeze. "You're a good person, Brenda, but don't let them take advantage of that." I nodded, my mind already racing. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of knowing they had gotten to me. But things were about to change. I barely slept that night. My grandfather's words played on repeat in my head. "They think you're stuck. They laugh at you." I had sacrificed so much 3 years of my life, thousands of dollars, and my own personal happiness, all to make sure Ethan and Sophia were okay. And this was what I got in return. Mockery? The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to explode or confront them at a family dinner like some overdramatic soap opera scene. No, that wasn't my style. I was going to handle this the way I handled everything in life, with quiet decisiveness. I was done. The call a week later. My phone rang. Ethan's name lit up the screen. I already knew why he was calling. It was the beginning of the month time for my donation to their household expenses. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Hey, Brenda." Ethan's voice was cheerful, like we were best friends and not siblings who barely spoke outside of transactions. "Just checking in. How's work?" I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice neutral. "Busy. What's up?" Sophia's voice piped up in the background. "Oh, and don't forget to ask about the money." Subtle as ever, Ethan cleared his throat. Yeah? "So, we were wondering if you could send the money a little early this month. We've got a few things coming up, and it would really help." I almost laughed. A few things coming up? Like what? A shopping spree? A luxury weekend getaway? They certainly hadn't looked like they were struggling at Dad's birthday. I let the silence stretch, letting him sit in his own request before answering. "Yeah, about that. I'm actually going through some financial stuff myself. Ethan paused. Wait, what do you mean? I mean, I won't be able to send the money this month. More silence. I could hear Sophia whispering something on her end. But just this month, right? Ethan asked, the first hint of unease creeping into his voice. You'll still help us after that? I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. Ethan, I've been sending you money every month for 3 years. I think it's time I focus on my own situation for a while. His voice tightened. Brenda, we're counting on that money. Oh, the irony. I held back a bitter laugh, and I was counting on my family not to laugh behind my back. Instead of saying that, I just replied, I know. The line went dead for a few seconds before Ethan finally spoke. Fine. He sounded cold now, almost resentful. We'll figure something out. Click. No more fake pleasantries. No more sibling small talk. No more obligation. I put my phone down and exhaled. It was over. The fallout begins. At first, there was nothing. No texts, no calls, no angry follow-ups, just silence. Then, exactly 1 week later, my mom called. Brenda, she started. Her voice edged with concern. I just got off the phone with Ethan. He says you stopped helping with the bills. What's going on? I sighed. Mom, I've been sending them $800 a month for 3 years. I think that's more than enough. I know, but they're struggling. Are they? I countered, because they didn't look like they were struggling when they showed up at Dad's birthday, looking like they just stepped out of a catalog. There was a beat of silence. Then, in a softer voice, she asked, Is there something else going on? I hesitated. Then, I decided I was done protecting them. I told her everything, how I'd supported them without fail, how I adjusted my life so they could keep theirs comfortable, and how I had found out straight from Grandpa that they had been laughing at me behind my back the entire time. My mother was silent for so long that I thought she had hung up. Finally, she spoke again, voice trembling. Brenda, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. That was the first time I had heard an apology from anyone in this entire situation. I let out a breath. I just can't do it anymore, Mom. And honestly, I shouldn't have to. I understand, she said. You've done more than enough. It was a relief to hear that. But I also knew things were about to get a whole lot messier. The desperation sets in. A few days passed before Ethan finally broke the silence. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a text. Ethan, hey, can we talk? I didn't reply. The next day I got another one. Ethan, look, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. We never meant to hurt you. Can we at least clear the air? I still didn't reply. Then, 2 days later, he showed up. At my school, it was after hours, and I was heading to my car when I saw him standing by the parking lot, arms crossed, looking like he had been waiting for a while. I stopped a few feet away. Ethan, Brenda, we need to talk. I raised an eyebrow. About what? He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely frustrated. Sophia's been a wreck. This whole thing has spiraled out of control. We didn't mean for any of this to happen. I folded my arms. Didn't mean for what to happen? The part where you took my money for 3 years? Or the part where you laughed about it behind my back? Ethan flinched. That's not fair. I stared at him. Isn't it? He sighed. Brenda, we need help. I lost some hours at work. And Sophia, I held up a hand. Stop. He did. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Ethan, I spent 3 years sacrificing for you. And the one time I needed to hear that you respected what I did, I found out you thought I was pathetic. Do you have any idea how that feels? He looked away. Yeah, I said, my voice quieter now. That's what I thought. Ethan swallowed hard. So, you really done? I nodded. His shoulders slumped. Fine. His voice was flat now. I hope you feel good about this. And with that, he walked away. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Free. You'd think after everything, after the cold way Ethan had walked away from me in the parking lot, that would be the end of it. You'd think wrong, because desperate people do desperate things. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan and Sophia had to fend for themselves, and they weren't handling it well. I wasn't there to pick up the slack anymore. And as it turned out, their financial struggles weren't just an inconvenience, they were a disaster waiting to happen. The rumblings begin. I started hearing whispers from the family. Ethan and Sophia are having trouble with the wedding vendors. I heard their mortgage payment is late. "Did you know Ethan asked Uncle Mark for a loan?" It didn't take long for the full truth to spread. Turns out, that comfortable life they had been living, the one I had been unknowingly funding, it was built on a house of cards. The moment I pulled my support, everything started to collapse. At first, they tried to keep up appearances, but it wasn't long before even our mother, who had tried to stay neutral, called me, worry evident in her voice. "Brenda, I don't know what's going on with your brother," she said, "but he's been acting off. He's barely talking to anyone, and Sophia keeps complaining about bills piling up." I stayed quiet. She sighed. "Brenda, are you sure you can't help him? Just for a little while longer?" I closed my eyes. "Mom, no." She didn't argue, maybe because deep down she knew the truth. I had already done more than enough. The unexpected invitation, a week later, I got a handwritten letter in my mailbox. Not an email, not a text, not a voicemail. An actual old-fashioned letter. The handwriting was familiar, Ethan's. "Brenda, we need to talk. Please meet us at the cafe near our house tomorrow. It's important." Ethan and Sophia for a moment. I just stared at the paper, debating whether to tear it up and throw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. The last-ditch effort. The next afternoon, I walked into the cafe, spotting them immediately. Ethan and Sophia sat at a small corner table, dressed a little too well for their financial situation. Ethan looked tense, his fingers drumming against the table. Sophia, on the other hand, had a carefully rehearsed smile. They were waiting for me. I took my time walking over, making them sit in their own discomfort. "Brenda, hey." Sophia greeted me like nothing had happened. "Thanks for coming." I slid into the chair across from them, folding my arms. "What's this about?" Ethan glanced at Sophia before clearing his throat. "Look, we just want to apologize. We shouldn't have talked about you like that. It was wrong, and we're really sorry." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And if Grandpa hadn't told me, would you still be apologizing?" Sophia's fake smile faltered. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Of course we would have," he said quickly. Eventually, I let out a slow, amused breath. Right. They were squirming now, and I knew why. This wasn't just an apology tour. This was a setup. And sure enough, Sophia leaned forward, her voice dropping into a more serious tone. "Brenda, we need a favor." "Ah, there it is," I smirked. "Let me guess. You need money?" Ethan shook his head quickly. No, not money." Sophia gave a hesitant nod. "We need you to co-sign a loan for us." I nearly choked on my own laugh. "Are you serious?" Ethan rushed to explain. "Look, we've hit a rough patch, okay? The bank won't approve our refinancing unless we have a co-signer. It wouldn't cost you anything. We'd handle all the payments." I leaned back in my chair, pretending to consider it. "Oh, so you just want me to put my name on a loan for you?" Sophia beamed. "Exactly." I laughed, actually laughed. They both stared at me, confused. "Wow," I said, shaking my head. "You really don't get it, do you?" Ethan stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean? It means you think this is still the same dynamic, that I'll just fix everything for you like I always have. But newsflash, I'm done being your safety net." Sophia's smile vanished. "Brenda, we're family. We're just asking for help." "No, you're asking me to put my financial future at risk for you." I held up a hand before she could interrupt. "After you spent years taking my money and then laughing behind my back. Do you even hear how ridiculous this is?" Ethan's face darkened. "You're being unreasonable." I laughed again, but this time it was sharp. "Unreasonable? You used me, Ethan. You lied to me. And now you expect me to trust you with my name on a legal document?" Silence. Sophia, realizing that charm wasn't working, tried a different tactic. Her voice turned pleading. "Brenda, if we lose the house, we'll have nowhere to go." I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "Sounds like a you problem." Sophia's eyes widened, her mouth falling open slightly in shock. Ethan clenched his jaw. I stood up, throwing a few bills on the table for my coffee. "I hope you two figure things out," I said, my voice cold. "But it won't be with my help." Then I walked out. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The final blow, 3 days later, I got an unexpected call from my grandfather. "Brenda, you need to come over," he said. "There's something I want you to see." Curious, I drove to his house, where he handed me a letter. It was an old document, nearly 2 decades old, tucked away in one of his storage boxes. My eyes scanned the words. It was a trust fund, a secret trust fund. My late grandmother had set up for all of us. intended to be equally divided among her grandchildren. But there was a clause: unless one is found to be abusing the family bond. I looked up at him, stunned. Grandpa, does Ethan know about this? He shook his head. Not yet, but I think you should. And just like that, I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice. This was about karma. And Ethan and Sophia, they were about to learn just how funny life could be. The moment I left my grandfather's house, my mind was racing. The trust fund was a game changer. For years, I had been the one supporting Ethan and Sophia, bending over backward to make sure they could live comfortably. And all this time, there had been money set aside for us, a future that they had no idea about. And because of their greed, because of how they abused our family bond, they might not be entitled to a single cent. I wasn't the type to seek revenge. At least, I hadn't been before all this. But something about this moment felt different. It felt earned. And it didn't take long before things started unraveling for them. The dominoes start to fall. I didn't say anything to Ethan or Sophia about the trust fund. I didn't need to. Life had a way of setting things straight without me even lifting a finger. Within a week, word spread through the family. Uncle Mark, who Ethan had tried to hit up for a loan, had mentioned in passing that I had been supporting them for 3 years. Aunt Melissa, never one to hold back, ripped into them at a family gathering I wasn't even at. You let Brenda pay your bills for 3 years, and now you're playing the victim? Are you serious? Mom later told me that Sophia left the room in tears, while Ethan tried and failed to defend himself. I should have felt bad. I didn't. The desperation reaches a new level days after the family started turning on them. Ethan showed up at my apartment. I had barely walked through the door after work when there was a loud knock. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it to find Ethan standing there, looking like absolute hell. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt, a desperation I had never seen before. "Brenda," he said, his voice raw, "please, just hear me out." I crossed my arms. "Make it quick." He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration barely contained. "We're in trouble. The bank denied our loan. Sophia's credit is shot. We can't cover the mortgage." I waited, expression blank. And his eyes flashed with something close to anger. "And you're really just going to let us lose everything? That nerve, that entitlement." I let out a slow breath, keeping my voice calm. "Ethan, let me make this clear. I spent 3 years giving you everything while you laughed at me behind my back. And now, when things go south, you come here expecting me to fix it?" He clenched his jaw. "I wasn't laughing at you." I raised an eyebrow. Grandpa said otherwise. Silence. His hands balled into fists, not out of violence, but pure frustration. "So that's it? You're just going to let me fail?" I tilted my head. "No, Ethan, you let yourself fail." He stared at me for a long moment before turning and walking away without another word. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. The final blow, the trust fund revelation. A week later, I got a call from a lawyer. "Miss Williams." The man's voice was formal, controlled. "I represent Ethan and Sophia. I wanted to inform you that they are pursuing legal action regarding the trust fund left by your late grandmother." I almost laughed. "Legal action?" I repeated. "For what?" He hesitated. "They claim that you withheld information regarding the fund, and they are contesting their rightful share." Unbelievable. They had no idea the trust fund clause existed. I kept my voice steady. "That's interesting, considering I only found out about the trust a week ago myself." More hesitation. Then, quietly, "I see. And even if I had known," I continued, voice sharper now, "I'm sure you're aware that there's a specific clause stating that anyone who abuses the family bond may forfeit their share. Should I go ahead and send over records of the past 3 years?" A long pause. Then, almost defeated, the lawyer sighed. "I'll inform my clients that it's in their best interest to drop the case." I smirked. "You do that." The aftermath, I never spoke to Ethan or Sophia again after that. I blocked their numbers, stopped answering family members who tried to mediate. I was done. But karma? Oh, karma wasn't done with them. A month later, Sophia left Ethan. I don't know if it was the financial stress, the mortgage disaster, or the fact that she realized Ethan was useless without someone to mooch off of, but she packed her bags and moved back in with her parents. "Ethan, Well, he lost the house, had to downgrade to a tiny apartment. From what I heard, he was working 2 jobs just to keep his head above water. And me? I thrived. I started saving the money I had once thrown away on them, took my first real vacation in years, bought a new car. For the first time in a long time, I was living for me, and it felt damn good. The unexpected closure months passed before I got one last call from my grandfather. "Brenda," he said, his voice warm, "I wanted to let you know I met with the family lawyer. Given everything that's happened, I've decided to make some changes to the trust fund." I frowned. "What kind of changes?" He chuckled. "Let's just say certain individuals won't be included in the future plans." I sat back, letting his words sink in. Ethan and Sophia were out. I never asked for the money, never cared about it, but knowing that they wouldn't get a single cent after everything they had done, that was justice. That was karma. That was the ending they deserved. Epilogue. A life without guilt. I used to believe that family meant sacrifice, that putting others before myself was the right thing to do. But I learned something important through all of this. Not everyone deserves your kindness. Sometimes, the best thing you can do, the strongest thing, is to walk away, to let people face the consequences of their actions. And now, I was finally free from guilt, from obligation, from them. And I had never felt better. Story 2. I still remember the way the air smelled that morning, crisp, charged with the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant aroma of someone's celebratory barbecue. It was my graduation day, a day that, in my mind, symbolized freedom, a day that marked the end of years of sacrifice and struggle, of late-night study sessions, of working extra shifts while balancing classes, a day I had earned. I was standing in my cap and gown, adjusting the stiff fabric, when my mother leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through my excitement. "When you get your diploma, hand it over to Logan," she said. I blinked. "What?" "You heard me," she continued, as if she were asking me to pass the salt at dinner. "He deserves it more." For a second, I laughed, expecting this to be some bizarre joke, but her face was devoid of humor. My father, standing just behind her, gave me that firm nod, the one he always used when delivering orders. "This isn't how it works," I said, my voice low but steady. "It's how it works in this family," my father replied. And just like that, the weight of every unfair moment in my life pressed down on me at once. Logan was my younger brother, the golden child, the miracle boy. My parents worshipped him like he was some sort of divine gift rather than an entitled screw-up who coasted through life on their blind adoration. Where I was expected to be perfect grades, work, responsibilities, Logan was allowed to stumble. And when he did, it was never his fault. When he barely passed his classes, they blamed the teachers. When he wrecked his car, they bought him a new one without so much as a lecture. Meanwhile, I had spent years scraping by, working extra hours to afford what they had freely given him. I had always known they favored him. But this was a new level of insanity. I swallowed the rising anger. This was my day, my accomplishment, and I would be damned if I let them take this from me. The ceremony started, names being called one by one. I could barely hear them over the blood rushing in my ears. I felt my mother's eyes on me, waiting. I felt my father's silent pressure, expecting obedience. And then, my name. I walked up to the stage, shaking hands with the dean, accepting the diploma that represented years of struggle. And then, in a moment that felt like pure, divine justice, the dean spoke again. "Today we honor an exceptional graduate," he announced to the crowd. "Not only has she achieved the highest academic honors, but she has also earned a full-ride scholarship for her master's degree." The auditorium erupted in applause. I turned to look at my parents. My mother's mouth was slightly open, as if trying to compute what she had just heard. My father had gone rigid. Logan, who had spent years being told he was superior to me, was now staring at me, eyes dark with jealousy. And in that moment, I realized something. I had won. After the ceremony, my mother wasted no time. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You embarrassed us," she hissed. "You should have given it to Logan." I clutched my diploma tightly against my chest. "Are you out of your mind?" My father's face darkened. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I almost laughed. "Everything you've done for me?" I shot back. "Like ignoring me for 23 years? Like never helping me pay for school? Like treating me like an afterthought while you handed Logan the world on a silver platter?" "You're being dramatic." Logan finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. That was the last straw. You have no idea how hard I worked to get here, I said, my voice steady despite the fury in my veins. While you were wasting every opportunity handed to you, I was fighting for mine. And now, you expect me to hand it over like it's nothing? The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, they had nothing to say. I shook my head. None of you deserve this. And then, without another word, I turned and walked away. I ignored the calls, the texts, the passive-aggressive Facebook posts from my mother about ungrateful children. I cut them off, moved across the country, changed my last name, legally ensured they could never attach themselves to my future successes. But it wasn't over, because months later, after I had finally built a life free of them, an email arrived in my inbox. Subject: Your father is sick. I should have deleted the email the second I saw it. It sat in my inbox, staring at me like some unwanted ghost from the past. The subject line read, Your father is sick. A classic guilt trip. I hovered over the delete button, but for some reason, I hesitated. Against my better judgment, I opened it. From, Mom, your father has been diagnosed with a heart condition. The doctors say it's serious. We need to be together as a family during these difficult times. Also, Logan has been struggling. He could really use your support. Please call us. I exhaled sharply. The message wasn't surprising, but it still made my stomach churn. First of all, we need to be together was rich, coming from someone who had never once made me feel like family. And Logan struggling? That could mean anything from failing another semester of college to getting cut off from a trust fund. I didn't even know he had. I slammed my laptop shut. This wasn't my problem. A week passed. Work kept me busy, and I thought I had moved on. Then, one evening, I got home to find someone sitting on the steps outside my apartment. I froze. Logan. Of all the people I never wanted to see again, he was at the top of the list. He looked rough, disheveled, unshaven, dressed like he had just rolled out of bed, clutching a half-empty Starbucks cup like it was keeping him alive. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice flat. He smirked, that same smug expression he always had when he wanted something. Look at you, all successful. I crossed my arms. How did you find me? Mom, obviously. He stood up, stretching like he had all the time in the world. She's been losing her mind trying to reach you. I sighed. And you came all this way just to play messenger? Dad's really sick, he said. He might not make it. Mom's been in tears for weeks. I stared at him. This is still not my problem. His jaw tensed. You're still holding a grudge, aren't you? I laughed, an actual bitter laugh. A grudge? Logan, for 23 years I was treated like I didn't matter. I built everything I have alone. And now that things aren't perfect in your world, you all suddenly remember I exist? He rubbed his face. They think you should help because you're successful. That hit me harder than it should have. Not because it hurt, but because it was so predictable. I took a slow breath. And what about you? What are you doing? He shrugged. I'm looking for work. I narrowed my eyes. Let me guess. Still unemployed. Still living off mom and dad. And now that they're struggling, you're looking for someone else to fund your lifestyle? He didn't deny it. Get out, Logan, I said, unlocking my door. He took a step closer. If you don't help, they might lose the house. I froze, and suddenly it all clicked. This wasn't just about Dad's health. It was about money. I turned slowly. Let me guess. Dad never saved anything. Mom spent every dime keeping you afloat, and now they're drowning in debt. Logan hesitated just long enough for me to know I was right. They're desperate, he admitted. I shook my head. This is karma. Every choice they made led them here. He stepped forward, voice serious. So you're really just going to let them lose everything? I met his gaze. They let me lose everything. I owe them nothing. And with that, I walked inside and locked the door behind me. That night, I barely slept, not from guilt, but because I knew this wasn't over. My parents weren't just asking for help. They were expecting it. And if I didn't play by their rules, they would find a way to force my hand. I was right. A month later, a letter arrived in the mail from a lawyer. At first, I thought it was junk mail. Maybe some bank statement I had forgotten to change my address for. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. They were suing me for emotional distress and financial abandonment. I read the letter over and over, convinced I was hallucinating. My own parents were taking me to court because I refused to send them money. They cited unpaid medical expenses, claimed I had an obligation as their child, that I had turned my back on family when they needed me most. I felt a sick kind of rage. They had ignored me my whole life, used me, expected me to sacrifice everything while Logan got every advantage. And now that their world was falling apart, they wanted to drag me down with them. Not a chance. I called Claire, my attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had seen enough of these cases to know when someone was bluffing. She skimmed the letter and laughed. "This is absolute nonsense," she said. "They don't have a legal leg to stand on. So what are my options?" I asked. She smirked. "We could wait and let a judge dismiss it. Or we could go on the offensive." I leaned back in my chair. "Tell me more." Claire explained that if we really wanted to shut this down, we could dig into their finances. If they were drowning in debt, falsifying paperwork, or even attempting fraud, we could flip the case on them. I had never been the kind of person to go looking for revenge, but after everything they had put me through, I was more than ready. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. Claire found records that painted a disastrous financial picture. My parents had taken out multiple loans they never repaid, maxed out credit cards, refinanced their house so many times it was practically worthless. And the worst part? They had used my name. Claire found applications where they had tried to take out loans using my social security number. I felt sick. This wasn't just desperation, it was identity theft. David's comment about them losing the house finally made sense. It wasn't just about Dad's medical bills. It was because they had spent every last cent acting like money would never run out. And now, they were so desperate that they had sued their own child. Armed with this evidence, we built a counter case for fraud and identity theft. My parents thought they could manipulate me into saving them. Instead, they had just signed their own downfall. A few weeks later, Logan called. I let it go to voicemail. Then he texted, "What the hell did you do?" I smirked. Then the next call came. This time, I picked up. "Did you really sue Mom and Dad?" he demanded. "Yes. They're talking bankruptcy. They might lose everything." I laughed. "They did this to themselves. You're ruining everything," he snapped. "They're not my parents," I said coolly. "Not in any way that matters." He was breathing hard, angry, desperate. Then he muttered something that sent chills down my spine. "You don't get it. You're putting us all in danger." I stilled. "What do you mean?" A long pause. Then, in a hushed voice, he admitted, "They borrowed money from the wrong people." My stomach twisted. "Who?" Silence. Then, very quietly, he whispered a name I recognized, not from personal experience, but from the news. I stood there, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "You mean loan sharks?" I said slowly, my voice eerily calm. "Not just loan sharks," Logan muttered. "Worse." I swallowed hard. "Who exactly did they borrow from?" Another pause. Then, barely above a whisper, he said the name. My stomach dropped. I had never met the man personally, but I knew who he was. A name that popped up in fraud investigations, extortion cases, and missing persons reports. Someone who didn't care about laws, only about getting paid. And my brilliant parents, people who had spent my entire life treating me like a disposable resource, had borrowed money from him. And now, they were out of options. I forced myself to breathe. "How much do they owe?" Logan hesitated. "A lot." I rubbed my temples, already regretting this conversation. "Logan, how much?" Another pause. Then finally, 300 grand. I nearly dropped my phone. 300,000? I repeated. "Are you joking?" "I wish I was." I let out a hollow laugh. "You're telling me they were already drowning in debt, and instead of fixing their spending, they took out a criminal loan for 300 grand? They thought they'd have time to pay it back," Logan muttered. "But then Dad got sick, and I cut him off." "Stop, just stop." This wasn't just reckless, it was suicidal. I ran a hand over my face. "And now what? They think I'm going to swoop in and hand them a check?" Silence. I sighed. "Of course they do. I don't know why I did it, but that night, I booked a flight, not because I wanted to help them, not because I suddenly felt some deep, hidden loyalty, but because I had a sinking feeling this was going to end very badly. When I landed, I took a cab straight to their house. It looked different. The yard was overgrown, the driveway cracked. The once pristine home I had grown up in now looked like a place people escaped from, not lived in. I knocked on the door. It took a full minute before my mother answered. She looked terrible pale, thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes. but her expression, that sharp, judgmental glare, hadn't changed at all. She stared at me, stunned. Then, instead of a greeting, she snapped, "Why are you here? No hello. No, we missed you. Not even a half-hearted hug. Just pure hostility." I pushed past her into the house. "I need to talk to Dad," I said. She scoffed. "You've done enough, don't you think?" Ignoring her, I walked into the living room. My father was there, or at least a version of him. He looked older, weaker, his frame thinner, his skin grayer. A cane rested beside him. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "So," he muttered, "the prodigal child returns." I folded my arms. "Cut the crap. We need to talk about the people you owe money to." That got his attention. He sat up straighter, glancing toward my mother. There was something in their eyes I hadn't seen before. "Fear. There's nothing to talk about," he said. "Oh, really?" I shot back. "Because as Logan tells it, they're coming to collect, and you don't have the money." At the mere mention of Logan's name, my mother flinched, and suddenly I realized something. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of him. And that's when Logan walked in. His face was tight with frustration. "Why the hell did you come back? To fix the mess you made?" I snapped. "Tell me the truth. How much do you owe?" Logan's eyes darted toward our parents. No one spoke. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't just my parents who owed money. Logan did too. I turned to my mother. "Did you lie to me?" She swallowed hard and looked away. Logan rubbed his face. "You wouldn't understand." I let out a bitter laugh. "I wouldn't understand? I fought for everything I have while you partied, failed out of school, and somehow still ended up exactly where they wanted. You spoiled, entitled, and completely incapable of dealing with consequences." His face twisted in anger. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I demanded. Silence. My father tried to stand, gripping his cane. His face was red with fury. "We did everything for you," he shouted. I laughed coldly. "No, you did everything for him." My mother began to cry, real tears. Not just guilt-ridden ones, but tears of desperation. "You have the money," she whispered. "You could help." And there it was. Even now, after everything, she saw me as nothing more than a resource. I clenched my fists. I knew I would never be free until I walked away, so I did. I turned, walked to the door, opened it, and just before leaving, I looked back and said, "This was your choice, not mine." I had barely made it to my car when my phone buzzed. "Logan." I hesitated, then answered. "You don't understand," he said, his voice panicked. "What?" I sighed. "They're coming." My stomach twisted. "Who?" "The people we owe." A loud bang echoed through the phone, followed by shouting. My blood ran cold. "Logan?" I called out. But the line had already gone dead. I should have driven away. I should have left them to clean up their own mess. But something inside me refused to walk away, at least, not yet. Not like this. I turned back toward the house. My heart pounded as I reached the porch. The door swung open. Logan stood there, wild-eyed. "They're inside," he whispered. I stepped in, and the first thing I saw was my mother clutching my father's arm, trembling. Across from them stood two men. Large, silent, dangerous. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, turned to me with a smirk. "You must be the smart one," he said. "The one who got away." I didn't respond. I was too busy calculating, looking for a way out. My father's voice broke the silence. "We don't have the money," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "But we'll get it." Scarface chuckled. "No, you won't." He took a step closer. Then he turned to me. "But maybe you can." All eyes shifted to me. "No," I said immediately. "I don't owe you anything." Scarface's smirk widened. "You don't. But family takes care of family, right?" I took a slow breath. "You think I care about these people?" I gestured to my parents. "They stopped being my family a long time ago." Scarface studied me, then laughed. "I like you." He turned back to my parents. "You've got a week." And just like that, they left. The second the door shut, my mother burst into tears. "You could have helped," she sobbed. I shook my head. I did help. I turned to Logan, meeting his desperate gaze. "Figure it out," I said, the way I had to. Then I walked out. This time, I didn't hesitate. I got in my car, started the engine, and pulled away from that house for the last time. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I felt free.